Hello and welcome to Tysky Sour, the first of 4 daily shows. The first time we've ever done this. Live from Liverpool at Labour Party conference, and the world transformed for this first time. Well, it's not a world exclusive, it's just something you do for the first time. But anyway, it's the first time we've done this, and we're delighted to be joined by Beth Redmond.
Hello.
Of Manchester Momentum fame. You will know her already from a show we did a while ago about, what was it called?
Cranks and...
It was mass movements and crank sects. It upset some people, but actually
Did
the
it?
tone of the conversation I thought was quite
I thought it was funny.
friendly. Yeah, no, it's funny, it was nice. Aaron?
What's up?
Aaron Bastani, you know him. He founded the whole thing. Good lad.
I think it's fair to say it's now very much a collaborative effort.
How have you had a nice time in Liverpool?
I've been here about an hour, but it's packed, right? Because you've got the Labour Party conference. Liverpool beat Southampton 3-0.
It's freshers.
So it's busy. It's busier than London.
And we have a Novara Media debut. We've been trying to get you on for, like 18 months or something.
Oh.
But now we've done it. Emma Dent Coad,
Good
MP
evening.
of the People's Republic of Kensington.
Delighted to be here.
We're absolutely delighted to have you. We have exclusive breaking news. The NEC meeting has now ended. So we talked about this a lot on Monday. So there was an NEC meeting where they decide what rules they're going to recommend, conference passes, vis-a-vis MP selections, and also how a future leader would get on the ballot so that they could be voted for by members. What we're hearing is that they agreed quite a good reform of the trigger ballot, actually. So at the moment, to trigger a reselection process for your MP, you have to win 50% of... Oh my God, I knew this at the beginning of the week. Anyway, it's old news now. you had to win 50% of all affiliated organisations, be those members' branches or be they unions, which meant that if GMB signed up 25 unions, which they had been in some North London constituencies, then that can secure an MP in place, and however bad they are, it's going to be quite difficult to get rid of them. That has been, well, if this is passed, and NEC recommendations normally are, we'll have a new trigger ballot system, whereby if 30% of CLPs or 30% of affiliated unions decide they want to launch a reselection process, so that would basically be an open selection from that point onwards, that would happen. So this is slightly short of what Momentum were demanding, which was open selection, so people could stand against an incumbent MP and you could have a positive campaign. I think that would have been better, but this is definitely progress. The other thing we were worried about was them increasing the threshold for someone to be able to stand as the next leader of the Labour Party. It has been increased, but in a way that's not as severe as what we thought originally. So it looks like what the NEC have agreed and what conference will vote on is whether from the current situation where an MP has to get 10% of the PLP to get onto the leadership ballot, now they'll have to get 10% of the PLP and 5% of the trade unions or 5% of CLP. So that's a slightly lower threshold than what it looked like at the beginning of the week, where you'd need 10% of the PLP and 5% of trade unions. There's still a PLP veto. I think this rule change is the more disappointing one, but it's not as bad as it originally looked. Aaron, you look like you've got some...
Well, conference is almost over. That was so long. We better pack up the stuff.
Was that like a diss? Was he dissing me?
Yeah.
No, you packed in. You packed in basically the entire sort of events of tonight's NEC, right? Which is a lot to digest all in one go. I thought it was quite a lot.
Well, that was news, and now you're going to comment on it, right? So I did the news, you do the commentary.
Okay, so there's two. For people who aren't acquainted with this, there's two elements to that, right?
Now Aaron's going to do it all again.
No, there's two. So what are we more disappointed with? And the bigger concern was over the course of the week that with the leadership thing, it was going to be 10% of the PLP plus 5% of the unions plus 5% of the membership, which would have given the unions an effective veto.
The big unions a veto.
Before we had, almost with the Electoral College before 2015. So it looked like a backward step. This isn't a backward step, which is good. It's kind of a fudge on what we already have, I think, but whatever. And then whilst enhanced trigger ballots aren't open selection, which is what we still want, it's a step in the right direction. It's a good compromise. So overall, not perfect, not what we want, not what 77% of delegates at conference want. They want open selection too. Despite that, I mean, it's positive. It's better than what we already have.
Emma Dent Coad. Earlier in the week, you were one of the few MPs, actually, apart from Chris Williamson, I can't really think of any other who've put their neck out in the same way to say you back open selections.
Absolutely, 100%.
Are you disappointed with this decision?
I do think it's a shame. It's, baby steps, isn't it? I think we're going to get there eventually. I absolutely 100% hold to the fact that if I'm not doing a good job, I shouldn't be their MP. I don't know why that's so controversial. Twitter went mad. Thousands of people liked, retweeted and everything else. I didn't think it was that controversial. Why is it so controversial? Aaron, do tell me why.
I think is that outrageous that Emma wants to be held to the exact same standards as every other profession in the country.
Yeah.
I don't know what's got into you.
Oh no, sorry, I knew it was clearly a major error of judgment.
And did you get any dirty looks in the House of Westminster once you came out in favour of accountability for our elected representatives?
I may get some next week, but I'm used to that actually. So what would it be for this time? I don't know. I think that's really important that people feel empowered. And actually, if we need to work for our members and we're working with our members and listening to them, that's what it's all about. Surely, the power should come from those members who are doing all your hard work for you, your army, as it were, when you need them. But they should also be the decision makers. They should be in control. So it should be two ways. I work for them. I always tell people, I never forget, I work for you. And some people find that quite shocking, but I do. I work for them.
So the argument sort of like against radical reform of selection procedures would be to say, by making MPs accountable to members, you're making them less accountable to constituents.
Yeah, there was a couple of people who asked me that on Twitter, but actually I do work for everybody, and I'm very, very careful not to just focus on the neediest parts of my constituency, but I do go out and work with everybody. So they may or may not see that, but I do. I'm very, very clear that I'm everybody's MP from whatever class, income bracket, or anything else they come from. Interestingly, in Kensington, the fabulous diverse mix we have, white British people are in a slight minority. So I'm a minority ethnic, and that's fabulous. So you know what? I have to reach out to everybody from all income brackets, and that's I've always done that. I've lived there nearly all my life in Kensington, Chelsea, and I'll continue to do that. It doesn't seem weird to me at all.
Beth?
I don't know if I've just been like living under a rock or whatever, but what are like MPs who are, obviously it's like probably like more obviously like just careerism, but like what are the reasons they give for like not backing it? Like what do they actually say?
Okay, I can give you a whole catalogue. Having
Some
this
of them
debate
say,
all week.
I don't want to lose my job.
Is that actually it?
Yeah, I've heard somebody actually said that. Why should I lose my job? That
Work is right.
It's like if you think of it as just a job, then you should actually be accountable the same professional principles as any other job. So that I don't see the problem.
What are your KPIs?
What does that mean? KPI?
KPIs, OKRs. I don't
You're
know,
not an incumbent
targets.
like a priest. You can be as bad as you like, but nobody can sack you.
So Lisa Nandy was on this week on Thursday saying that it's too costly.
Costly?
So she was saying that if you have open selections, she did a sort of like kind of, who I feel really bad for if we pass this reform? The members, because their dues will be going towards funding selections instead of paying for leaflets. And the riposte was the members want this to happen.
Yeah.
But they're also paying for the leaflets probably and delivering them. So I don't know. I'm not going to contradict anybody's very deeply felt beliefs. I'm just saying what's worked in Kensington, and you know what, it was a little bit revolutionary. So I'm going to continue doing what I did.
Beth, predictions. The first 5 MPs to go under the new trigger ballot system.
Oh God. I was going to say Frank Field, but he's already gone.
Yeah, too late there. You should have made that prediction 6 months ago. We called you an oracle.
I don't know. Who do you think?
He's one of yours. Are you from his constituency?
I'm from Alison McGovern's constituency, which is just next door.
Oh, right. What do you think about Frank Field's loss?
I'm made up. I don't think he's a very nice man. I used to work in his constituency, and like the most he said a lot of mad stuff, but I think the worst thing that he said was that like problem families who like cause kind of like mayhem on like nice roads or whatever should be punished by being housed in like empty lorry crates underneath a motorway flyover in Birkenhead. Yeah, which is mad.
Innovative at least. I mean, this guy's thinking big, asking the questions everyone else is too morally upstanding to ask.
To be correct. Yeah. He's been an MP. He was first elected to Parliament. You won't believe this. In 1979. So Frank Field has almost been an MP for 40 years. Now, what's his crowning achievement? What is it? Lionising Margaret Thatcher, saying that we should have, temporary accommodation built under the M56, which is actually what he said, I think.
Yeah,
the M56. Yeah. So, I mean, it's just, this guy is a classic example of somebody who's just a pen-pushing nobody, no ambitions, doesn't want to represent the members, doesn't really want to advance any kind of public interest. It's a cushy job. And actually, I've heard the same from some MPs. I quite like my job. It's quite easy. It's quite nice. Well, sorry, that's not the point. It's public service. So, I mean, he would have been number one, I think. But the first couple has got to be, ironically, given this has come from the left, will be sort of arch-Brexiteers like Kate Hoey will probably be one.
I mean, it would be pretty easy to get the 30% needed to trigger a process to replace Kate Hoey and Vauxhall, wouldn't it? I'm hoping Chris Leslie, just putting it out there. I don't know much about Streatham CLP, but please, guys, do God's work.
The tide is turning. Let's put it like that. I'm not going to badmouth anybody, but the tide is turning, and people need to recognise that, actually.
Yeah.
Can I just sort of say the thing about the cost?
Yeah.
This is like saying that, if we have one member, one vote for the party leadership, it'll cost more, and it does. But Labour's now got a turnover of £50 million a year, because it turns out if you give ordinary people a voice, they'll participate and they'll pay for it. Right? The idea that it's revenue negative, no, actually, open primaries go even further than open selection. If you wanted to make money, I don't agree with open primaries, by the way, actually. I think open selection is the best. That's my view. Maybe we disagree on that. Open selections would make money for Labour. The idea it's revenue negative is so myopic. I'm not going to use nasty words with Jess Phillips. With
that's
with
a slur
Lisa
in
Nandy.
itself, really.
No, because
to
Lisa
make that
Nandy's thing
mistake,
is Lisa Nandy's thing is very nice, very calm, very collected.
Yeah.
So I'm not going. You don't need to.
No,
go
it was a
there.
nice debate. It was.
Yeah, I thought so.
Yeah.
But I just thought the argument has no water whatsoever. I think it's completely inaccurate. Complete opposite is true.
All right, let's move on to what happened at conference today. So this was all what happened in an NEC meeting today. What happened on the conference floor was women's conference. There was a speech by Dawn Butler. There were some policies announced, and then there was sort of some surprising claims made. We're going to go to the policies first. Beth, what was announced at today's women's conference by Dawn Butler?
Dawn Butler talked a lot about domestic violence and how the Tory party has kind of failed women in kind of that arena, and how Labour had plans to kind of fund refuges more locally, and what was the other thing she said? Something about quality.
The equalities brief.
Yeah.
So there was two. So the thing about domestic violence is it's one of those ones where it's sort of like a simple policy. You don't have to think that hard about it, because the Tories cut local government funding by 50%. That meant that 1 in 5 refuges had to close. That meant that 95% of people who work in a refuge have said they've had to turn people away for reasons of lack of space and lack of funding. So the policy that's needed in that situation is quite obvious, which is give them some money. So I think her policy, quite rightly, sometimes when there's a simple policy, you should just go ahead and do it. So she said, we're going to give them some money, but at the end also there'll be sort of an element of local autonomy, because that's what the various women's refuge charities are recommending. At the same time, her second one was, or the second big announcement was the idea that they're going to make a permanent Department of Women's Inequalities, and that would be a cabinet position, so there'd be a Secretary of State. And sort of the critique that led to that is the fact that the Women's Inequalities Minister just gets, for the last 8 years, has just been moved to any department depending on where a woman works. So from 2010 to 2011, the women's brief was held by Theresa May in the Home Office. Then it was handed to Maria Miller in Culture. Then it was handed to Nicky Morgan in the Treasury. Then it went to Sajid Javid in the Culture Department, but he only had it for a month or so, I suppose, because he was a bloke. And then they gave it to Nicky Morgan in education, then Justin Greening in education, Amber Rudd in the Home Secretary, and then Penny Mordaunt in international development.
That shows real commitment. Constantly putting people forward to carry the standard for women's equality. No, it shows genuine commitment, surely. I don't know why you're making such fun of it, really.
Well, maybe they were being held to a really high standard. Maybe that was a sort of
Maybe
like,
that was it.
if they haven't met their targets, we're going to give it to another woman in the cabinet.
Yeah, exactly.
Or Sajid Javid.
Or Sajid Javid.
Who was very caring about women.
Yeah, but I think the idea is to make an independent department. I don't think anyone's going to be complaining about that. Sounds like a reasonable policy.
Yeah.
The controversial thing that was done is she backed the 1980s militant council in Liverpool. I'm not quite sure she knew what she was doing. So the quote was this: speaking at the party's women's conference, Butler said, "Conference, we are in Liverpool where over 30 years ago the council stood up to Thatcher and said, better to break the law than break the poor." Which is interesting. So in previous conferences, especially people like John McDonnell, because he was sort of, people kind of associate him with demanding no cuts, illegal budgets. So he had to sort of like go overboard to say like, no, we're against illegal budgets. That would be the opposite of what Labour councillors should be doing, because that would mean that you bring in the Tory administrators, and that will make the difficult situation that councillors are in fundamentally worse. So he's saying it's not in the interest of constituents to do a legal budget. Partly, I think, to compensate for what was seen as his past sympathy to that kind of policy. So Ken Livingstone actually got rid of him from the GLA because he was talking about doing a no cuts budget.
Really?
When he was... Yeah, so John McDonnell in the 80s was too extreme for Ken. So Ken was the mayor of London, and John McDonnell was head of finance in the GLC, and he was saying they should do a huge public campaign against Thatcherism, and the demand would be a no cuts budget. Ken was like, mate, that's too much, I think he was a more reserved man at that point, potentially. Reserved's not quite, I'm not going to use the word I'm going to use. But John McDonnell had to make that real effort, and Dawn Butler's just come out and said, yeah, fuck it, no cuts budgets. Militant 2.0.
Derek Hatton's sat at home buzzing.
Yeah.
The tide is turning, as I said.
Red Dawn Butler.
Yeah. Do you back it?
I couldn't possibly, could I? The thing is that with any kind of budget, there are always different ways of doing it, and I followed on the Kensington Chelsea Council. All the sums that are flying around now about the council and their reserves and all their spending and the opera and all the other stuff, that the money that has been hemorrhaged onto vanity projects. That's work that not only me but particularly me, that I did over the years. I mean, just disseminated out into the media and so on. So if we're taking that council as an example, which I always do, because it's not just one thing, but it's the worst possible example of how money is abused and hemorrhaged in all kinds of ways and not spent on where it should be spent. Grenfell Tower being a really important example. Then we have to really look at that, and the way that the council have played with their funding cuts. So there were countless small groups out there. I'll never forget, they cut the Persian Elder Women Lunch Club, and it was $6,000 a year. Honestly, these are probably people quite elderly, meeting up once a week, cost next to nothing. They were cooking for each other, and they cut that. It was so cruel, and they were cutting. That one thing never left my mind, because probably all these women are now isolated. And yet they were spending money on all kinds of crazy things as well, and I have it all catalogued at home, and I'm still watching them, which is why I restood for election as a councillor and still a councillor, so I can get the Part B papers.
Great.
Yeah, I'm watching them.
I didn't know you could be a councillor and MP at the same
there's
time.
quite a few MPs.
Yeah,
really?
West
Yeah.
Leslie is right, I think. Or he was.
Yeah, West
Well, it's
Street.
good to have another job.
There's quite a few. It's quite a few. I don't take the
You
allowance.
need something
by the
to
way.
fall back on.
But there's always a way of doing it if you actually look at where the money's being wasted, and we found an awful lot of money being wasted in that council. If that's a good bad example, then there are ways around it. Always.
Can I say I went to a really amazing Vietnamese restaurant in Soho, most amazing Vietnamese food I've ever had.
Where's this going?
This is incredibly relevant. I'll tell you
we
what.
don't know where it's going. This is great.
It was amazing, and it's a very
Just talking
successful.
about money, mate.
It's a very successful business. No, but it's proof. This kind of a
serious moment.
Give me a sec. And it was delicious.
What did you have?
Yeah, come on, get to the
I
point.
had pork 7 ways. It's delicious. Unbelievable.
7.
Anyway, this
Fucking hell.
restaurant started in Dalston in the 70s, and it was started by Vietnamese refugees. And apparently there was a community centre given over to Vietnamese families, and every couple of months they would basically start a restaurant there, earn enough money to start a restaurant, and then a new group would come in, and like 3 or 4 restaurants came out of this. And now you have this restaurant, I think, with 2 or 3 restaurants across London employing people, serving delicious food, great value. And it's that kind of intervention by local government which really was incredible. And now that would be called an incubator, you know. And then it was just like a progressive thing, helping people out. And then like, innovation and all this stuff is like just, you know, giving somebody who's vulnerable or missing out
It's really not hard.
a helping hand. Yeah, it's not a new idea.
Most people don't want handouts. You know, I don't meet people who want handouts all the time. There's very, very few.
Yeah.
Most people actually want to get their life on track and then progress and you know, pay their
And to help others,
pay their
right?
tax. Yeah, exactly. I mean, the number of people who are Grenfell survivors, bereaved and evacuees, who said, you know, well, you know, I've always done this. I've always worked. I've always paid my taxes. Now they're doing this to me, and they really feel like they're being punished. Why are they being punished? It's this real pride in not having to demand anything. And there's one I know who's one survivor who said, well, I'm never going to take their money. And it's a real point of dignity for him. He will not take their money. I don't want their money. I'll make it on my own, even though he's struggling.
Can I ask a question about Grenfell, if that's okay?
Of course.
Meghan Markle's obviously put together this cookbook, and the proceeds are going to help Grenfell survivors.
That's lovely. I'm very, very
Do you have,
touched.
as a Republican as well, do you have any sort of thoughts on just that general spectacle of a princess donating money from a cookbook to those people?
It's very, very moving, and I'm very, you know, very touched by it. You know, we have people all over North Ken. Half of North Kensington are out there doing charity work. They're volunteering day and night, and it's very lovely that she can spare a little bit of time to do that. Bless her for that.
Wow, you are incredible.
Bless her. What's wrong with you?
I'd say like requisition Buckingham Palace without compensation. House them all.
What
Sod
kind
it.
of food is the cookbook?
I don't know.
Was it Yankee food? Was it like Snickers salad?
They didn't invite me to that fresh shoot, I'm afraid.
Oh, well,
No,
No.
fuming.
that's kind of
Didn't
interesting.
invite
though.
me. I don't. Sometimes I don't go to things like that. So maybe they thought
No,
I
fair
wouldn't
dues,
want
like.
to, or maybe they just didn't want my face. Those I don't know.
Yeah, you never know.
But
Because we haven't had you on Novara before, so we've got a lot of catching up to do. So where are we in terms of being the MP for Kensington?
Okay.
You know, how much is there still to be resolved when it comes to the aftermath of Grenfell? There's still people not being housed.
yeah,
Promises broken.
It's horrible. It's a really, really horrible. There are people who are rehoused and are feeling a bit better and getting their lives back on track, and I'm absolutely delighted for those who are. We have about 100 families on our books who are not. So they may be survivors or bereaved or evacuees who had to move out, and because they're so traumatised, and this isn't just they don't want to look at that time. No, they are genuinely, seriously traumatised. And I've heard some of the stories. Some of their children have stopped developing,
Physically?
educationally,
Right.
and emotionally. And there's all kinds of other issues. Some are really quite frightening, and some people may never ever recover. I genuinely think that, having spoken to, I work very closely with the NHS and the mental health services, substance abuse. A lot of people are really, really struggling and finding ways to alleviate that in ways which aren't healthy for them long term. But there's also a lot of people who are just really getting depressed, and after 15 months. Still in hotels, which some are. Some of them are moved around regularly. I spoke to somebody the other day who a young woman went back to her hotel, and they said, you haven't got a booking for tonight, here's your stuff. And they just handed her, been into her room, cleared her stuff, and just put it in bin bags. And she had to go and find somewhere else, and then call the council the next day and go through all that hassle. And that's not the only time. I've heard that quite a few times, because there's just mismanagement there and a lack of care, actually. And some of the housing officers are getting fed up and angry and saying, if you don't take this flat, then you don't love your children, and really awful things, really quite shocking. As I say, people in very, very poor mental health, and not being looked after as they should. And it's shameful. It really is shameful. I'm ashamed, actually, to be part of a political system which has allowed that to happen. And I feel so frustrated that there's very little I can do. Because I can go and talk to the Secretary of State for whichever department it is. And they sit there and they listen and go, oh, that's awful. I just didn't know that, Emma. And they're right then, really nothing happens. I find it really frustrating. I'm there and I should be championing them, and I am. It's very hard to make any change.
There was a piece by the LRB recently about Grenfell Tower, and it was written by Andrew O'Hagan, and he said that one of the reasons why many of these people haven't been rehoused is because they're looking for the best deal, and they're sort of saying that they're homeless. I mean, obviously, how does that make you feel? Because that, for me, it almost feels like it's feeding into the most reactionary, right-wing things.
I know, and one of the issues is that he came out and he talked to an awful lot of people on the ground, and a lot of people really opened up to him in a way that they hadn't to anyone else. And people tell me anything because they know me. Trust me, that's one thing. But they opened up to him in the same way, and he then turned it into a publication. And then, rather than supporting them, his attitude flipped at some point, and people don't understand why. And I genuinely, there was one of a bereaved woman I saw in the street one day. This wasn't unusual, actually, and she came up to me and she just started sobbing, and she said, I talked to him, and I didn't know who she. Oh, she's talking about Andrew Hagan, and she was sobbing. She said, I couldn't believe what he did. After I told him my story, because I told him things I haven't even told you. And this is somebody I'd known a long time before. And she's absolutely distraught, saw it as a betrayal.
It's exploitation, right? These are super vulnerable people being exploited by a supposedly progressive journalist.
Well, yes, exactly. We had a public meeting about it. People really upset. About 70 people came to public meeting to discuss that publication and what had happened and how he'd turned it around. Because he talked to some of the former councillors and decided they're actually good sorts.
Well, because they're like him, right? They're sort of like basically affluent.
Or how I'd like to be, I don't know. Yeah, exactly.
Progressive right-wingers.
And it's shocking. We've had so many people come into the area and try to exploit it in all kinds of different ways. Even if they think they're being caring, they're actually there for themselves and not for the people who need it. And that's really difficult. They don't even recognise it themselves sometimes.
What do you mean by that? Like, if you can be more specific?
There are people who actually have gone there because they need to be needed.
Okay, I see what you mean. So sort of paternalistic.
And there's some people who are very genuine, all kinds of ways. So I've given up my job to look after these people. And I thought, how's your family coping with that then? Yeah. But they need to be needed, and it's really complicated. And the reason that is happening is because the right help isn't there.
It's a question for sort of everyone here, related. So when that fire first happened, there was really sort of a sense that politics had changed. It was just a tragedy that seemed to demonstrate all the problems of ignoring people who were poor, fundamentally, and of outsourcing responsibility for public services and public housing, and of a society where in the centre of a rich city, poor people are treated with contempt because ultimately the powers that be want them to move so that land can go to someone who can pay more for it. And there was obviously that tweet where Clive Lewis said, was it burn neoliberalism or something like that?
Burn neoliberalism, not people.
Yeah, so there was this idea that this was a watershed moment in politics. And I don't know if you think that that's something that was not, or that was a moment that looked like it could have been a shift in British politics and never quite arrived. Or do you think there has been an effect?
There has been, actually. There really has been. And it's being smothered. It is happening. It is out there. It is happening. The communities around there have got very powerful, very articulate. They're self-educating, self-organising. And all the different groups I've met or have communicated with all over the country who are doing different bits of work, cladding over here, architecture over here, there's loads of it. It is shifting. But what has happened is, again, using the council as a microcosm, the council have quadrupled their media comms department. And they put out fabulous press releases every day. They think, oh, everything's great. Everyone's, oh, you know, it looks so good. And similarly, the government, they're drowning it out. They're hardened towards it. They've hardened towards the whole issue of Grenfell. And they're trying to spin their way out of it. They're trying to get rid of it. I've been trying to get a backbench debate on all the Grenfell issues for about 8 months now. And I hit a brick wall all the time. So I've got 80 Labour MPs are signed up. We've got 5 Conservatives, and these are people who all stood up in Parliament and spoke very movingly about the things they were concerned with, but they won't sign. They won't sign the paper to support a motion to have a debate about it.
Why?
Well, I was told that there were 2 things that could topple the government last year.
Yeah.
One of them was Kensington going red, and the other one was Grenfell. So I don't know whether or not that's true, but it has actually made a massive difference, and it's up to everybody to make that happen, actually. But it's being drowned out by the right-wing press and by the most incredible media comms system that is smothering it. But it is there. It is happening.
Yeah, I think, like, in response to your question, like, nationally, I think it's, like, really frustrating, because at the time I remember, like, it being kind of like everyone just assuming that that's what was going to happen, that was going to bring down the government or whatever.
Yeah.
And although, like, in my head I remember thinking, like, I don't, like, if they are still in power, like, I don't understand what it could take to, like, make them, like, not cling on anymore. Like, as long as they're still there, like, they've got the power, basically. But it's just mad how kind of quickly everyone moves on, like, not kind of willingly per se, but, like, things just move dead fast, and, like,
the press have moved on, and
Yeah.
and the media comms have moved on.
Yeah.
But it's still happening.
Yeah.
And there are still people mobilising out there, and you know, self-learning, and you know, they're getting ready out there for different ways of working. And there are a lot of different groups. I've spoken to the RIBA, the Royal Institute of British Architects, and the Association of Insurers, and all these people that are shifting the way things work. All of them are, but it's not being acknowledged because it's trying to, you know, people in authority are trying to drown it out. Yeah. But it is happening.
On a national level, what do you think the ramifications?
I think civil society has, like, really shifted massively, even just since the election, and that was obviously, I think Grenfell was one of the totemic moments. And I think we're going to talk about Labour's polling at some point today.
Yeah, let's talk about it now if you want.
We can talk about it now. So Labour's, like, polling 37%, and then people go, oh, Corbyn's only polling 37%. Ed Miliband won 30% in 2015. So despite an unprecedented onslaught from the media, the worst summer imaginable, Labour's still polling 37%. They're still within the margin of error of the Conservatives. So that tells you they won't, I think, under any circumstances get less than... by the way, I think they'd probably add an extra 10 to that during a general election campaign. I think Labour will get about 45% of the next general election. No, I just, you know, maybe I'm being overly optimistic. I think that's probably what's needed to win a big majority as well, right? But anyway, to get 37% under all those circumstances tells you have a ginormous fragment of British society which understands the connections between Carillion, between Grenfell, between you know, failure after failure in regards to outsourcing. Now we're seeing, for instance, just this week, amazing story, the number of people using cars is going back up again, right? Because people don't want to use trains anymore because they're too expensive, and the service is often not very good. The number of people using cars is going back up again for the first time in like 15, 20 years. This week it was in the Telegraph and the Times. And so you look at the measures by which we judge the success of society. Life expectancy, stagnating. It may even be going backwards.
It's dropping in Kensington.
Yeah.
It is dropping.
We haven't got enough data over a long enough period of time to say that, you know, for sure, but it looks like it's going backwards. In terms of wages, we know that wages are frozen or going backwards. Home ownership, we know it's going backwards. Home ownership in this country, the lowest level since 1985. Productivity, in terms of how much is produced for an hour of work, hasn't gone anywhere for 10 years. So all of this is a society in decline. It's a system in breakdown. And I think, like, today, right now, not in a general election, about 40% of society gets that, and that's huge. That's really big. And I think Grenfell is probably the single biggest moment in that consciousness.
I think that the only reason that isn't discussed openly all the time is because of the dominance of the right-wing media.
Yeah.
But it's there, and people, as you say, people recognise it.
Whenever anyone talks about the dominance of the right-wing media, we have to tell you to support left-wing media. We're still running our fundraiser, our subsraiser. It's going quite well, so thank you for all of your support. But if you want us to keep expanding, keep increasing the regularity of our content, the consistency of it, the punctuality of it, please go to support.novaramedia.com. Of course, as part of #NovaraLivingWage, we are encouraging you to donate 1 hour's wage a month, and we will continue working around the clock.
Can I just add to that? You want to say something?
I was just going to say we should also do a shout out for Tribune.
Oh yes, go for it. You do that.
No, I was just
you were
gonna
there.
You were in the first issue, right? You got a piece on the website?
No. We had a really nice article written about us by someone about activists in Manchester, which was really good. But basically, the Tribune has been relaunched. I don't know much about its history, but it's a really cool magazine. And I think it's £30 for a yearly subscription, and it's dead good. And it's literally 100 pages long.
It's cheap.
Yeah,
it's cheap.
It is
cheap for its digital and print, right?
Yeah, it's very smart.
All right, we're going to move from.
Can I just big up Novara as well?
Yep, go on, babe.
So we've raised loads of money. We're doing nightly shows, right, for the next 4 nights. Mm-hmm. We could do that all the time, but that's going to require you to help us. So go to support.novaramedia.com. Help us build a new media for different politics. And we're doing well. We wanted originally to raise an extra 3,000 subs, which is on, if you go to the website support.novaramedia.com, you can see the updates. But now we're stretching to 5. If we do 5, we can pay everybody in the organisation a couple of days a month. We can do daily shows, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
We can.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to move from the media of the future to a story about the media of the past. Why did Heather Stewart, editor at The Guardian, tweet, "This is outrageous. Banning journalists because you don't like their paper's editorial line smacks more of Donald Trump than the lovely, open, democratic social movement Momentum aspires to be." Beth, what prompted this tweet? This is now a quiz.
Was it the world transformed joining in the boycott of the Sun?
It was correct. Now you've answered the factual question. You've got to do the comment.
I mean, that's just annoying, innit? Like, the first thing I saw when I got to the World Transform this morning, and the first thing I saw when I got there was 2 like black cabs outside, and with this logo plastered all over it.
We've got a flag somewhere.
Yeah,
We've got a huge flag behind me.
Get it out.
I just think that tweet means that, like, it's just kind of like, has she ever been to Liverpool in her life? Like, do you know what I mean? I can't remember last time I saw a copy of the Sun in Liverpool. I was born on the Wirral, as I said before, and I was telling someone this today. Like, when my nan lives in Canny Farm in Liverpool, and we used to have to drive through the Mersey Tunnel. And maybe I was like 3 or 4 or whatever, and you'd put the money in the toll box, and there'd literally just be stickers plastered all over it that said "Don't buy the Sun" on them. And I remember saying to my mum, I was like, because obviously I thought it meant like the normal Sun, because I was a child. I was like, what's going on there? And like my mum and dad like sat me and my brother down, like explained everything, and we were like, okay. So like everyone on Merseyside's just grown up knowing that you don't read the Sun, you hate the Tories, you hate Margaret Thatcher. No questions asked. You know the story why, and you just get on with it. So I think it's really kind of frustrating when people who kind of, I don't know, make comments on it just saying it's like, oh, a question of editorial, like, difference or whatever. It's not, it's bollocks. It's like a decade-long boycott.
I'm sure she regretted that tweet the moment she sent it, because every now and again you get a moment where sort of like a liberal, well-meaning Guardian journalist sort of tweets something that they think is sort of like eminently reasonable, and then within sort of 30 seconds it becomes apparent that they've just outed themselves as someone without any understanding of sort of like what working class people think, or sort of like the culture of the left.
Yeah, has she deleted it?
No, she hasn't deleted it, but she did the thing that people do where they sort of like retweet people responding to it, and that's your sort of like, that's you apologising publicly, I think.
Okay.
But
it's still annoying though.
I mean, I think we're all going to agree it's annoying, right? Okay, we're going to go to questions in 7 minutes. Before that, we're going to talk about Brexit. I mean, you can't do a political show in God's Year 2018 without, for about
He said it was you who wanted to speak
7
about
minutes
it.
talking about Brexit. And yeah, you can pretend to sleep, Aaron, but I know you love this topic. So you think that Salzburg has exonerated Labour's strategy over the last 2 years?
Yes. It is relevant because we've got conference and, of course, all these melts and dweebs. We're going to try and make it about Brexit rather than party democracy. Clearly, both issues were going to be at the centre of the next few days. And I think what Salzburg shows is that actually the approach taken by the leadership in the Labour Party, the 6 tests around Brexit, letting the Tories really screw up a mess of their own making, I think it completely exonerates Jeremy Corbyn. I think it says that the approach taken was the right one. And you see all these moaning whinge bags, these gas bags, jolly on Mormon stuff on Twitter, and they go, you should have defied it. Well, first of all, Labour don't have a mandate to negotiate Brexit. This is how our system works. If you have no seats in Parliament, you have a mandate to do stuff. Labour doesn't have a mandate. It's an opposition, right? Secondly, there's no mandate, therefore, in Parliament for a second referendum. So basically what they want to do, and I know some on the left don't like this term, it's a useful term, I think, especially in the digital era, they just want Labour to virtue signal. And what's ironic is that Jeremy Corbyn's approach on this has actually been about power, not protest. And the people that go, well, we're meant to be a party of power, not protest, are only interested in a powerless protest. That's all they want. It's kind of ridiculous. So I think that Jeremy Corbyn's been completely exonerated. I think the approach is the right one. That's been proven. I mean, I'm intrigued to see how these melts will now approach the next several days, given that I think it's indisputable. You saw Brian Cox, this doctor guy.
This doctor guy?
The ketamine doctor guy.
The astronaut.
The astronaut. He's quite an interesting man, apart from his politics are dog shit. And he was like saying, I don't, because Barry Gardner, was who we'll have on tomorrow.
Yes, we're having Barry Gardner on tomorrow. Make sure you tune in.
We can raise this with him, right? And Barry Gardner said never interrupt.
Maybe we could get Brian Cox on. Wait,
he won't come on now.
Look, these people all come on as long as I sod off. It doesn't matter. That's the general response. He said never interrupt your enemy when they make a mistake. It's a platitude that's also correct in this instance, right? And Brian Cox said, you're not enemies, you're meant to be on the same side. And then it's like, no, we're not on the same side. The point of the opposition is to hold the government of the day to account. And all these people that talk about cooperation between parties, they seem to want a one-party state, right? And that's not how politics works, because you want alternatives, because then the public can choose the best course of action and they vote for them, and that's what we do. If there was just literally 3 parties all doing the same thing, which is what we had before 2015 with the Lib Dems, the Tories and Labour, people get turned off, young people riot, depression goes up, suicide goes up, you have social breakdown and anomie, which is what we had in this country for decades. So I'm intrigued about what's going to happen in the next few days, because these plonkers who reveal their complete ineptitude and incapacity to understand politics just reveal more of their ignorance to us with each passing hour.
Emma, one of the analyses of your surprise win in Kensington was that, I mean, obviously we know that your borough is, I think, got one of the highest inequalities in the country. So it's not a country where sort of
borough in Britain.
Material.
Yeah, I did the sums for that too.
Where sort of material problems aren't a problem, or sort of where low income isn't a problem, basically. But it is quite a high income constituency, and that's why it's been a Tory safe seat generally. And one of the analyses of why Labour were able to take it on such of a swing was that it's both wealthy but also very heavily Remain in sort of like what it votes for. Do you buy that analysis, and does that make you feel like you are under pressure to take a sort of ultra-Remain position to sort of maintain the support of that constituency?
Okay. So Kensington constituency is nearly a third, just under a third EU nationals, so we have to listen to them.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, exactly. My predecessor was a Brexiter, interestingly. My first ever vote was to join the common market, we used to call it in the olden days. Over the years, I kind of stood by that. I'm a kind of Remain and reformer, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, I do listen to my constituents. So that was certainly an issue. But it wasn't the only issue. There were lots of other issues. A lot of people, because I talked to everybody from all walks of life, a lot of people were fed up with my predecessor. A lot of people didn't like the fact that she was very keen on ivory, fox hunting. There were lots of issues that she didn't actually deal with, that I was better at dealing with.
What was the name of your predecessor, sorry?
Victoria Borwick.
Okay, it's Lady Victoria Borwick, wasn't it? She was a...
And she loves
something like that.
ivory. Oh my
Not
God.
ivory. No,
Isn't that legal?
She refused to support the ban on ivory.
Right.
Because she worked for the ivory trading lobby or something.
Yeah, antique ivory. And, we've been through all that. You can actually fake antique ivory, so it really doesn't work. And when you actually look at the numbers of elephants that are still slaughtered all the time, it's absolutely despicable and unexcusable. So there are lots of different issues, and that wasn't the only one. A lot of Conservatives voted for me. Some of them probably were to do with Remain, but some of them were also because I'd stood up for their communities in the face of unpopular planning applications and all kinds of other issues which were just unfair, unjust, and were going to ruin the DNA of their neighbourhoods forever. And I still do that now. So there was a mix of things. I am being heavily lobbied for the People's Vote now. Now there are two versions of it. There's the People's Vote, which I think is being promoted by the fed up Liberal Democrats, bless them.
We're all fed up with the Liberal Democrats.
And which is literally a vote on the deal, yes or no to the deal. And then there's another version which is yes or no on the deal or Remain. So you get the...
No one actually believes in the first. Anyone who says they want the first is lying, and they want the second.
They all want, because they want to go back to the halcyon days of, a slightly, pretty much imperfect deal that we had before. So, I find it very difficult. I don't think the People's Vote is a positive way forward. So I am being heavily lobbied. I do listen to people. I read all their letters and emails and talk to them, but I'm finding it very difficult because I don't think it's any kind of positive route to any kind of stable politics or improving how things work with our imports, exports, people movements, and all the other things which are going to be heavily affected. Some people are already going home. As we know, racism increased during the referendum, and it hasn't gone down that much. We have very, very little hate crime in North Ken, and it's still, it's gone down a bit, but it's still there, far more than it was before. And all the negative effects of that hideous campaign that was run. It was hideous. It was dishonest. It was negative. It was really toxic. That is still there. And my other fear about a People's Vote or whatever it's going to be, a second referendum, is that we'll get that back again. They have so much money to pour into a second referendum, they on the right and the right-wing Brexiters, that we could have that all over again. I just think it could be a rerun. They may pick some different targets. But it was really hateful, and it changed the way that people saw their neighbours. Very clever, but hateful. I don't like that kind of divisive politics. So I'm really stuck on it, and I don't. Where is the positive way forward unless we have a general election and a proper socialist government? That's the only possible outcome, and that's something which many of my constituents would be very happy with. Not all of them. A lot of people came out and voted when they'd never voted before because they knew me and so on. So a lot of first-time voters, and there were Conservatives who voted for me. Whether or not they will next time, we'll have to see. But it's a cock-up, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
The whole thing is a cock-up.
Beth, I'm going to direct audience question directly at you.
Oh, God.
From Avery PS. Why do these hard Remainers think they can win a second referendum when they're almost universally useless?
Why have you asked me that one? I mean, I can't. I kind of agree. I actually voted Remain, but I think if we had another referendum, I'd vote Leave.
You'd actually vote Leave?
Yeah, I think I'd vote Leave. I went to a United Political School with this amazing guy called Stevie Nolan, who basically talked about like the EU and how kind of undemocratic it is, and he basically like changed my mind. And I completely agree with you about a second referendum. I just think it would be awful. I think it's not kind of, rather than listening to why people vote Leave in the first place, it's kind of just in a way like disrespecting them, being patronising to them, being like, oh, you didn't actually know what you were voting for, when actually a lot of them have got a really good understanding about how much of like a boss's club the EU is, and like that's what they're unhappy with. And the worst person, the person who's been annoying me so much about this on Twitter is that little guy who looks like he'd be in Harry Potter.
Eddie Marsan.
Yeah.
He should be locked up after what he said to me.
What did he say to you?
I tweeted these pictures of a Thomas the Tank Engine toy outside an MP's office. The pictures are clearly outside a door.
Did you put them there?
Because no, I didn't.
He doesn't have a pass.
And then, of course, because these people have to sensationalise and overreach and lie about everything, somebody broke into the office and they've called the police, which is great. I'm glad they did, because if you think somebody's breaking and entering, it's very serious. I'm glad. That's important. Let's see what the police say. Great. I was just sent some pictures by an anonymous person. I tweeted them, and actually, in retrospect,
also it's dead funny.
Well, whatever. I mean, the worst. I said this on Politics Live. I said the worst thing you can say to me is, "Come on, Aaron, you're being a dickhead." Okay. But what Eddie Marsan said was, okay, I'm going to break into your house and leave like a note on your wife's pillow. And he was like, there's an equivalence between these two things. And I'm like, well, what? Hold on. You're willing to be put on an offenders register to like...
What a weirdo.
Oh, weird man. So that's who you mean, Eddie Marsan.
Yeah. He's weird.
I don't think we should listen to actors on Twitter. I can't.
That's
like
true.
Nearly everyone who's an actor on Twitter are some of the worst people on Twitter.
Except Rob Delaney.
He's not an actor, he's a comedian, I reckon.
He's an actor who's in Catastrophe, which is great.
Also...
All right, Rob Delaney's
I'm
allowed.
going to say something which is a bit weird. I don't think I'd ever say this. Hugh Grant is really funny on Twitter.
Is he?
Is he?
Really
I don't
funny.
follow him.
I don't
just
follow
saw
him
something
either.
by
I just
mistake.
assumed he'd be like
He's
a
really
mad
dry
boy.
and funny.
Oh, great.
Who's and with Nell and I, the other guy? Who's the other guy?
Oh, he's a socialist, isn't he?
Paul McGann.
Yeah.
He's an actor, and that's a great film.
All right,
Who
maybe
was-
I spoke too
Who was the guy
soon.
who had a go at Eddie?
Some of them are
Eddie,
okay, but
what's
some of
his
them are
face?
really bad.
Can I just say about
remember.
the EU stuff?
Yeah, go on, babe.
I think Tom Cabasi's got a great theory. He says basically the moneyed interest in this country, like the city people that want out because it will help them with commodity trading, hedge funds, wealth management, they put loads of money into Leave.eu. It's like 10% of society. Then you've got like the other sort of elite interests. They put all their money into a second referendum. So it's like 70% of the country don't really care. They want a progressive Brexit. It doesn't really change very much. They probably want to tighten immigration, but not too much. They don't really want the economy to change very much. They want a soft Brexit. And yet they're kind of ignored in the debate. And actually, these two sort of batshit, sort of niche parts of the conversation are just being funded like no tomorrow. And then the same people that are saying, like, oh, if we had a second referendum, now we would win. These are the same people that were
That's
like...
how they all talk as well.
Yes, these are like the Yes to AV crowd.
Yeah.
You know, and if you look at the 2011 referendum on Yes to AV, look at the country. Nowhere in the country had a majority vote for electoral reform because it was a terrible compromise. There's like 2 bits of London. And this whole conversation about a second referendum is basically, these are the people leading it. It's 2 bits of London. And in terms of what you were saying in regard to, like, I would say there's 2 major arguments why we shouldn't have a referendum. The first is it doesn't settle anything. Because what you're going to make it best of 3, best of 4.
Exactly.
It's not going to win by a big margin, right? Even if it won, I think it would lose, but it won't win by a big margin. We should say, look, we should say our system is about majority at Westminster, delivers what people vote them in on. That seems fair. It seems to have worked a long time. Let's just go back to that. So that's the first point. And then the second point is it keeps Theresa May alive. A second referendum is the one thing that keeps the Tories in power and emboldens Theresa May. There is no progressive argument for a second referendum. The argument is, let's have a general... If all these melts and people who are like, oh, second referendum, the Jolly On crew, If they'd instead been saying Theresa May has to go, the Tories have to go, if them and their friends, the media, had done that, we would have had a general election. And avoiding a hard Brexit would have been infinitely more likely than what they've done instead, because their instinct as establishment liberals is to punch left. So of course they attacked Jeremy Corbyn whilst demanding a second referendum. It's like it's in their DNA, you know. It's like an Iranian person liking lamb kufta. Liberals punch left.
You are.
You know.
You are.
Anyway, so it's just the stupidest thing, and Emma's absolutely right. You know, it will if anything can make our political conversation even more poisonous, it's a second referendum.
Yeah.
All right, we've got 2 minutes left. We're going to be really professional here. So we started almost exactly at 8, and we're going to end almost exactly at 9, as if we were on real TV. Put us in your guide. So final points, everyone.
I just want to say it's been so much more fun here than it was with Andrew Neil.
When were you with Andrew Neil?
Oh, it was some time ago. It wasn't nice.
Was he mean to you?
Yeah, it was very mean.
What was it, Politics Live or this
It
week?
was Sunday Politics.
Yeah.
It was really hard.
The thing with him is I think he's one of those ones where it really depends on his mood. So if he's in a good mood, he'll just ask you nice questions. If he's in a bad mood, he'll just be like incredibly horrible to you.
Yeah, I tried to shake his hand. I went in and he was looking at his iPad. And I went, "Oh, hello, so nice to meet you." He wouldn't even shake my hand.
Wow.
I know. It's rude.
Shouldn't be allowed.
Rude.
See, my experience on this week was different. He was very chummy with me, and so was Portillo, even though he's blocked me on Twitter. And Liz Kendall wouldn't shake my hand. That's
Interesting. Beth, final point?
I don't know. I was just going to make the point that you've unfollowed me on Twitter.
Yeah.
Ooh, that was a good final point.
You tried to start a pylon against me.
No, I never.
Yes,
I just called you an arsehole because you were being an arsehole.
You retweeted something and like being really smarmy. I was like, Beth's trying to start a pylon. I'm not playing that game.
Fuming.
No, we're still friends on Facebook. I still follow you on Instagram. I still like many of your tweets because you're great. But I'll follow you after this. You tried to start a pylon against me.
I literally never.
You did. You know what you were doing.
All right, we're gonna do some dispute resolution once the feed goes off air. But you don't need to see this, guys. You don't need to see this. We will see you tomorrow at 8 p.m. when we're going to have Barry Gardner. I haven't quite decided who I'm going to put on with him, actually. I think after tonight's discussion, because we were all fairly consensual in our... Is that what... Can you say that when you agree as well?
Yeah.
We kind of all agreed that we don't really want a second referendum. So I do think I should get a hard Remainer on tomorrow for the sake of balance. Otherwise, we'll lose the state funding upon which we rely. That's not true. We rely on your funding. So go to support.novaramedia.com for a new politics.
No, new media.
I always
politics
forget our
is these
tagline.
guys.
I'm going to get it written on my hand. New media for different politics.
That's right.
Yeah. Different media for new politics. Anyway, give us 1 hour a month so we can keep working around the clock. Thank you so much, Emma Dent Coad. It was a pleasure to have you on Novara for the first time ever. We'll get you back on soon. Aaron Bastani, always a pleasure. Beth Redmond. How's it? I'm glad you started a fight as your last comment. I was into that.
Yeah, I just love how much everyone is sticking up for me and agreeing with me about Aaron.
Beth is awesome. She was trying to start... I love Beth. She tried to start a pylon. That's fine.
Ben Kavanagh's saying, Beth is awesome, get her on Novara. She's literally on Novara.
Yeah.
She's the second time.
She's on Novara.
Have you been on the podcast? Novara FM?
No, I haven't.
Okay.
No.
All right.
So you're not taking any questions tonight?
Well, the thing is, there's not as many questions as normal.
It's Saturday. You know, we hit 500 watching
Saturday
night.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Everyone's more Beth. Everyone loves Beth. I mean, they love you too, Emma. But I think with Beth, you need to start an argument with someone.
Start an argument with Aaron.
So call Aaron a dickhead,
Try
and then people will really come out in your favour.
That's what often happens. There's a pattern here, isn't there?
Yeah. All right. This was Tysky Sour. We are Novara Media. We are in Liverpool for Labour Party conference, and we will still be here tomorrow. So tune in tomorrow at 8 p.m. Good night.
Ta-da.
Good night.